superhero of the 90s is here on Earth. Don't mess with Superboy.
Shuster! Hi guys, Rob here from the All Star Superfan podcast, and I am proud to present the very first episode of Superboy, a rewatch podcast for the 90s, about a show from the 1980s. This has been a long time coming for me. Any of you who listen to our show will be familiar with some of our fellow podcasting friends and their wonderful rewatch podcasts. I'm thinking about Matt Truex from Lois and Clark, Zach Moore from Always Hold On to Smallville, and the Always Hold On to network of podcasts, and of course Anthony Desiato, who does a great job presenting, and now for another exciting episode all about the George Reeves Adventures of Superman show. I've long thought that there needed to be a similar dedicated rewatch podcast for the strangest live action Superman show of them all, and the one that gets the least amount of love. I'm talking of course about Superboy the series, also known as The Adventures of Superboy. For anyone who doesn't know, the Superboy show came about when the legendary Alexander and Ilya Salkind, the producing duo from the Superman movies, they were made aware that they could exercise their remaining rights to Superboy by way of a syndicated TV show. So working closely not only with DC Comics but also the flying effects team that worked on the movies with Christopher Reeve, they would end up creating over 100 episodes of television with very respectable Nielsen ratings for a syndicated show, or so I'm told. Over the course of the series, we would see a number of iconic elements from Superman comics brought to live action for the first time ever. Lex Luthor technically makes his television debut, at least in live action, but we also get Metallo, Bizarro, Mr. Mix's Pitlick, all, with mixed results, but faithfully adapted. As the show came to the end of its fourth season in 1992, Warner Brothers apparently stepped in and prevented the show from ever airing again in reruns in North America, so as not to confuse audiences with their then brand new primetime show, Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. Or so the legend goes. We've had conflicting reports from different people about what exactly went down, but ultimately what this meant was, for a generation of fans, my generation, Superboy was lost, forgotten, a rumour. But thanks to fans online and the advent of DVD box sets, and much later, streaming networks, Superboy lives, and the show is being rediscovered and discovered by new fans every day. So for this podcast, I'm going to go in a slightly different format than what you might be used to, and I'm going to explain why. One of the most interesting things about the show is how different it is from season to season. Season 1 and 2 go through a lot of changes, including a pretty significant recasting, but generally they feel similar enough. Clark Kent's in college in Florida, of all places. He's going up against everything from crooked oil tycoons and mobsters, racketeers and drug dealers, to aliens, swamp creatures, Draculas, time-traveling cyborgs, and a bunch of comic book accurate supervillains. But then you get to season 3 and 4, and they are basically a completely different show. The look, the setting, the production standards, and even the quality of a lot of the episodes are much, much higher in those later seasons. Far more of a timeless noir setting. Most of the episodes take place at night by that stage, and there are some truly excellent episodes written by legendary comic book writers, which not every Superman show has had. So the way we're going to do this is the episode will cover 2 different episodes from the very different eras of the show. So we're going to do one episode of Superboy the series, meaning the first 2 seasons, and then we're going to follow that up with an episode of The Adventures of Superboy, meaning season 3 or 4. And for me, what I'm most excited about with this podcast project is exploring my relationship with the show by introducing it to other people. And I'm not under any illusion that Superboy is quote-unquote great television. A lot of it is very weird, and some of it is very, very bad. But a lot of it is also very, very charming and very, very entertaining, and some of it is really quite brilliant. And all of this just makes for an incredibly interesting show to talk about. This is the last time a Superman show was made outside the Warner Brothers umbrella. this is one of the last times we'd see a Superman show where a lot of the special effects, especially the flying, had to be done for real and on such a low budget. And it's fascinating to look back on and admire it for what it was and how it was made, and think about some of the production decisions that might have gone into making it what it is. So, grab your press pass, your skateboard, your Casio watch, your wide-rimmed glasses, of course, strap into your wire harness, and let's take to the skies. So, I would like to welcome to the hallowed halls of Shuster University, Mr. Alan Burke. How are you doing tonight, sir?
Rob, you've been a very naughty boy, and do you know how I know that? Because I keep profiles, digital profiles, on a hard drive of everybody I know.
That sounds that sounds like it could be $1 billion idea one day, Alan. I don't know about you. For anyone in the extremely unlikely event that you're coming to this show and you've never listened to any of our other stuff before, Alan is my co-host from All Star Superfan. He is the one I've inflicted this show upon so many times in the past, and I couldn't think of a better first guest to kind of set sail as we set course for Shuster University and indeed the Bureau for Extra Normal Matters. So, Alan, I mentioned a little bit before now about my own history with the show and the format, the funky format we're going for with this podcast for the 90s. But I want to hear from you. Can you tell me your full unedited history with both Superboy the series and the Adventures of Superboy?
I'm thinking back now to a time before I knew that this show existed. And what a glorious time it was.
A better time in your life.
No, I never heard of the show up until around 2006. I never saw it when it aired here, and this is something that's always in the back of my mind now, because I'm wondering, would I love it with, reverence and nostalgia and all the weight that I say love things like Lois and Clark with now.
Yes.
But I didn't grow up with it at the time. I never even heard of it until the Up in the Sky documentary that came out in 2006, narrated by Kevin Spacey around the time of Superman Returns, and there was a brief mention of it, and I'm almost sure Gerard Christopher was on that for a small clip.
He was, and do you know that's so interesting? I never thought about that before. That's a lot of people probably only heard about it in that documentary for the first time.
Yeah, and I quickly forgot about it. I remember thinking at the time, geez, I wonder what that is. I've never heard of this. It must have been something that didn't really last very long, and I kind of quickly forgot about it. Until we became friends, and you mentioned it then, and once Superfan started, it came up more regularly, and then we went back and watched.
Some would say too regularly.
Some would say too regularly. And we went back and we reviewed episodes, season 1 episodes, and I think some season 3 episodes.
Yes.
And I have to say, like I was there with you when we interviewed Gerard Christopher. Unfortunately, I missed the John Hames Newton interview we did on Superfan. But like I have them on DVD now. I had season 2, 3, and 4 were bought for me a few years ago for Christmas by my lovely wife. I only this week ordered season 1. Because I'm hoping that I might get to come back on the show maybe before we get through season 1. And I'd like, to be honest, I really enjoy, and we've spoken about physical media, I won't get into all that again, but I just love taking it off the shelf, sticking it in my old multi-regional DVD player, firing it up and watching it, and I'm looking forward to doing that with season 1. But even like this week I watched the season 3 episode, the first 2 episodes of season 3, and then I didn't stop. I continued on. I watched Lair and Nyla, I think it was called.
Yes.
And watched a few more episodes. And it's not my Superman show. I've said this before on our own podcast. It's not my Superman show. I didn't grow up with it, but my appreciation for it is ever growing and ever evolving.
Excellent. And would you agree with my new hot take that this is actually 2 different shows altogether?
Oh yeah. Yeah, this is like, it's chalk and cheese. When I watched some season 3 episodes this week, as I just mentioned, and then I went back and watched the pilot of season 1, and I was like, whoa! Because when I watched the season 3 ones, I was like, yeah, you know what? I could see me getting into this as 10. Yeah. What year would this? Say 1990, 1991 for season 3.
Yes, correct. Yes.
Yeah, so I would have, like, it was only 2 years later I was watching the X-Files when I wasn't meant to be watching the X-Files, and I loved that, and I love Superman. So you take Superman, you take the X-Files, you mash them together. I'm right in that age bracket that they're looking for. I would have loved it, I think. Season 1, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure if I would have stuck with Season 1, to be honest with you, even at that time. I probably would have, because we were so bereft of Superman content after Superman 4. And at that time, especially in those years, I was just going back to the 4 theatrical films on VHS over and over again. We didn't have Lois and Clark yet. I didn't have any access to the George Reeves Superman show at the time or anything else. The odd comic book here and there. So maybe that would have kind of enticed me to stick with it. But I can't see how I would have been a huge fan of Season 1. I know you were the flag bearer for Season 1.
No.
But we'll get into it.
We will get into it. And you mentioned the Season 1 DVDs there. It's ironic in a way that they're harder to get now than the other seasons, because the other seasons were released as like on demand from Warner Archive or something like that, whereas the original the Season 1 DVD was actually released to like the mass market, at least in America. I don't think it was ever released here. But I bought it at the time. I imported it from, I want to say, Amazon or something at the time. And man, that's a great set. Even if you don't really like the show, it's a great set. The special features are great. The commentaries with Elias Salkind and John Newton are hilarious. They're so funny. And you mentioned there that like being bereft of Superman content may have forced you to like that show. Like there could have been an element of that for Season 1 with me as well, because for a long time that was the only thing you could really get, unless you were willing to go and buy bootlegs, which was harder to do in those days. So I had those Season 1 DVDs, and just hearing you say that there, I'm like, maybe that's why I like Season 1 so much, because it was all I had for a long time, and I would just go back and watch them again and again and again.
The Season 1 DVDs are generally expensive. Like when my wife Stacey bought me the Season 2, 3 and 4 back about 2-3 years ago now, she intended to get me Season 1 as well, but Season 1 was going for like $150 on eBay for one season, which is crazy. I have Season 3 here in front of me. I'll just hold it up there for the screen. But I just when we were talking about it this week, I decided to look up, and I saw a guy in the US selling a box for $27, and I think it was 15 quid for postage, so I just ordered it straight away.
Excellent. Oh, that's a good deal. That's good.
Yeah.
You know what? I can be fussy about physical media sometimes, but I will admit it's a very attractive set. And they do a great job decorating it, and all the characters are on the different DVD sleeves and stuff on it. It's lovely. So I look forward to you getting that, and I want to hear what your thoughts are on the extras and the commentaries on it.
Because I don't think there's much extras on the other. There's nothing on the rest of the seasons.
There is nothing. There is absolutely nothing. Yeah. So it's our job to to give people all the extra content that they've been bereft of with those other seasons. So I suppose let's jump straight into it. So we are going back. We are going to the 8th of October, 1988, to meet our superhero for the 90s, Superboy. And Alan, we're off to a strong start, because this might be the worst episode of the entire show.
Man, I got up this morning and I watched it this morning, and wow. I have
Holy
to say,
heck.
Holy heck is right. I assume it gets better, and over the years I've learned not to judge any show really by the pilot episode of the show. Some shows have excellent pilots, like Lois and Clark, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer with Welcome to the Hellmouth and all that stuff. But it's generally speaking, a lot of shows haven't found their feet in that first episode. This is definitely a case of that.
Can I give you a real shocker? That I kind of assumed you knew this. I actually, listening to you now, I don't think you know this.
Okay.
This isn't even the pilot episode. It's just.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was the pilot.
There legitimately is, in my opinion, a pretty good pilot episode. But for whatever reason, it's like episode 5 on the DVD. And I think they aired it late for some reason, and there's two different versions of it. We'll get into that in a couple of weeks.
Is that the one where he has the American flag behind him? He flies and kind of introduces himself as Superboy. I think I have a vague memory of that, actually, from a few years ago.
You're mixing two episodes up there, but there is a scene where he flies into a really shitty rear projection scene and introduces himself as Superboy. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but man, that episode is better than this one. Come at me.
Something similar happened with Lois and Clark, didn't it? With the second episode, they swapped the second and third episode when they released them as well for some unknown reason. Maybe it was lack of action or something like that.
All I can think, we'll get into it in a sec. I have a theory as to why they did this one first, but man, it makes no. So look, just a couple of facts about the episode before we get into it. So this episode is called The Jewel of Techacal. It aired October 8th, 1988. The IMDb synopsis: Lana's father, an archaeologist, comes to the university, Shuster University, with what he thinks is a cursed relic. Actually, not sure that that's accurate. Lex Luthor then steals the jewel in order to sell it to the highest bidder. What would you guess the IMDb rating for this episode is, Alan?
Oh, God. 3.5?
It's a very charitable 5.6.
Okay. Okay, fair enough.
Which to me seems, again, very charitable. So probably my favorite part of the whole episode is the intro sequence, which we get straight into the intro sequence. We get this lovely little sequence of Superboy just kind of flying over and under a bridge in Orlando. I have reason to believe it's the same bridge they used in the movie License to Kill. I could be totally wrong about that, but I think it's the same bridge, and it's also in Mission Impossible 3. Give me your thoughts on this intro sequence.
I didn't love it, to be honest.
Okay.
I thought it looked a little bit kind of copy and paste, like 90s font. And, I don't know what the software would be at the time, but like it looked like a Microsoft
100%
PowerPoint kind of a thing. It was fine. I having seen the opening credits for the season 3 episodes and other seasons, season 4 and that, it was a bit low keel in comparison to those, but it is nice. It's very Florida. It's very bright. It's very 90s. He's flying.
Well, this is 80s.
80s even, sorry. He looks great in the suit. And we'll get into it later on about the wire work and the flying and stuff, which I was impressed with even in this episode, right back at the very, very start. But yeah, it's I thought it was a little bit naff. But
I kind of meant to say this, but like a big part of my season 1 love is that it is naff. Like it's hokey and schlocky and B-movie like, and I love B-movies. I love my 80s schlock. It just brings you into that vibe and that era and that aesthetic in a way that like none of the other seasons do, and that's a big part of why I love this so much. And I do get that from the opening intro. The other thing as well is the music in season 1, and that opening music they have in this episode in season 1 is incredible. I genuinely think it's amazing. It's an incredible Superman theme, and it doesn't get better than this, I don't think. I think it actually gets a little bit... I don't think the other seasons, the theme tune isn't as good in the other seasons. I think it's so good in this original season 1 intro. But anyway, we finish up with the intro. We see Superboy kind of fly into the camera. There's for anyone fact fans, that there's no sound effect when he pulls up and flies towards the camera. Usually you hear a whoosh.
Yeah.
But that they don't play that in this episode for whatever reason. We might get that next week. So Act 1, we open on a random shot of a plane pulling into an airport. And I don't know, did you listen to my interview with John Newton where he mentioned that the production had a special product placement deal with Eastern Airlines?
He did say that. Yeah, I remember that.
And when he said it, I was like, I'm trying to picture these shots, random shots of airplanes, and then straight away in this episode, oh sorry, I make a mistake here. We open on the scene of Professor Lang and his assistant. They're flying back from this archaeology dig. Pretty awful rear projection shots. They're in this kind of prop plane, and there's like really, really bad rear projection behind them. But then immediately, and they're talking about this jewel and all this stuff. But immediately after that, we get this shot of a plane pulling into an airport, and I was thinking, my God, that's what John James Newton was talking about. So this is a big story that Professor Lang and his assistant are back from the mysterious country of Techacal. Clark and TJ, who is kind of the Jimmy White in this show, we're meeting all these characters for the first time, and you're kind of just supposed to guess from the fact that TJ is holding a camera and he's taking pictures of Clark and the Dean that he's Clark's friend. The dean is really excited about these artifacts, and he's saying that it'll bring great insight into the Mayan culture. Now, I would say Mayan, but he says Mayan. Any thoughts on the actor who plays the dean, Alan?
Oh, should I know him from somewhere?
No, he's just really bad. God bless him. I'm sure he was just a local, Floridian day player.
Look, I have to be honest. A lot of the acting in this episode, especially, bar maybe Stacy, bar the actor maybe playing her father.
He's not bad, yeah.
He's not bad, and bar actually TJ himself, who I thought was all right.
I like TJ, man.
I know I heard someone recently criticize him as as an actor and compared to the actor who replaced him later on. But I think he was fine. But a lot of the acting is very, very stiff.
Yes, it is,
and that goes for John. And we'll talk about a specific actor in a while and his accomplishments.
Yes, we will.
But look, John looks great, I thought, as Clark and everything. We'll get into that as well. But yeah, I thought the acting overall was very, very wooden.
I want to ask, one of the things that makes this episode unusual is Clark is wearing a full-on suit in this episode. Like for most of the times we see Clark, he's wearing like a suit and tie, which is not his usual attire in season 1 of this show. He's usually wearing like real comfortable college gear. You thought he looked fresh? You thought he looked
I thought
happening?
John looked like he stepped off the pages of a Superman comic. I thought he looked great. The hair looked great, the glasses, the suit. You're straight into him, when he's talking to the dean. He's there in his role as a reporter, I presume.
He's doing a bit of journalism, baby.
He's doing a bit of journalism. All for that. More focus on journalism and Superman stories. Thank you very much. And look, like I said, the acting was a bit stiff, but it's scene 1, episode 1, air quote. He looks great, and I was impressed with him in general in terms of his aesthetic.
So it's important to say now the very next character we meet is Lana. She walks past TJ and Clark, and she is doorstepped by a man who we quickly realize is this show's version of Lex Luthor. And he invites her to a Jailbreakers gig. I've never heard of the Jailbreakers. Have you?
Was that the Heartbreakers? Was
it the Jailbreakers?
I thought it was the Heartbreakers. Maybe it was the Jailbreakers. Maybe I misheard him. No, I assume it's not a real band.
Well, I'm not. Sometimes real bands show up on this, by the way, and we'll see that in a couple of weeks. But it could be. Well, we'll need to double check that. He asks Lana if she would go to this gig with him. Lana asks, "How did you know that I liked that band?" And you might regale us with what Lex responds with.
He has a hard drive on which he keeps profiles of everybody at Shuster University. Now, obviously, they're not uploading that information themselves, but if he had thought up with that idea instead of stupid idea of stealing the jewel, he would now be Mark Zuckerberg.
He would literally be, and of course, Mark Zuckerberg kind of eventually played Lex Luthor, so it all comes. And
the funny thing is that looking at it from 2025 vision, the thought that the idea to her that he has this information with regards to her likes and dislikes and what she's interested in, and she's disgusted by it, compared to what we've been doing over the last 20 years and just sharing that information openly with everybody who would listen. I found that quite funny.
Now, Alan, one of the main reasons I was so excited to have you on this episode specifically is your reaction to poor old Scott James Wells as Lex Luthor in this specific episode. There's a bit, Lex loses his temper when Lana walks off and refuses to go on a date with him, and he turns to Leo and he goes, "Nobody talks to the president of the senior class that way. Nobody!" And you had a reaction to this years ago that was just one of the funniest things I've ever heard. And I want to cast your memory back to that and just give us your thoughts. And they can be revised thoughts because we have a little bit more. Go ahead.
Not revised in any way, shape, or form. I think I said something along the time at the time when we spoke about Scott Wells' performance. I think I said something along the lines of how it is literally the worst piece of acting ever put to screen.
God bless the man.
I still pretty much stand by that. Like, at least with someone like, Tommy Wiseau or someone, you can laugh at it a little bit. Like, and I feel bad to a certain
Yes.
extent because
Yes.
obviously this actor has since passed away. And not only that, but Ed Gross released an interview with him a couple of years ago. That was, contemporary at the time. He interviewed him at the time, and he was talking about all the effort he was making to improve and how he was worried about how he'd be terminated and all that kind of stuff. But on the face of it, just judging what's on screen, it is truly, truly awful. It is the worst acting I have ever. I actually stopped it and had to rewind it to watch it again because I didn't even pick up the first line that he said to Lana as she approached. He was like, beautiful. And I was like, what did he say to her? I didn't quite pick it up. And it's just so like it's like he's just reading it off the script. Like there's nothing there. It is almost a criminal offense how bad this acting is.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I just to circle back to something you said, like there is an element of like, I feel sorry for this man, genuinely.
Yeah.
Like it feels wrong because, he himself sort of, that interview you mentioned there, by the way, just what an incredible piece of history to have.
Yeah.
Ed Gross, Voices from Krypton podcast, an absolutely excellent podcast because Ed will often post these kind of archive interviews he did at the time when these things were actually being made. And he has this incredible interview with Sidney J. Furie right before Superman 4 came out as well. Like, just amazing stuff like that. But yeah, like you really get the sense listening to that interview that this was a guy that like was in over his head, like, didn't really know what he was doing, didn't really know the scale of how beloved this character was. And he was a jobbing model / actor. Like he didn't ask for all this. He probably wasn't being paid very much,
I would have to wonder legitimately how he was cast. Like, I can't imagine his screen test, if there was a screen test for his audition, was on point. Is it a case that he walked in? He is a good looking man.
He's a very good looking man.
From him. He's a very good looking man, and you can tell he's short. He's it's only a certain type of body type physique that when you're wearing a woolly cardigan, you can still tell the guy is shredded, and you can tell he's shredded. Was it a case that he just walked in and that was what someone like Ilya or someone else, one of the other producers, directors, had in their mind for the role? I honestly don't know.
He was in a music video for a Gloria Estefan music video. I'll get the name for the song the next time he pops up. But yeah,
I have to be honest, the acting would suggest that is exactly how he was cast.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, and I don't want to be too harsh, like, no. But like, you have to judge these things as they are. As it's put there. It's a project that was made. It's on screen. On the face of it, it's just really, really bad. Like there's literally nothing positive I can say about it. It's really bad.
Just to circle back to a note of positivity, I would say that this is comfortably his worst episode.
Okay.
And I truly believe he gets better, and like I think he gets significantly better. And in fact, I think some of his episodes in this season of this show are like really top drawer Lex Luthor stuff. Excellent. As far as I'm concerned.
You know what? I'm thrilled to hear that.
I'm an unreliable source where this show is concerned. So I'm
fully intending. I haven't watched every episode of Superboy. I'm fully intending to watch these episodes as your podcast, as this podcast is coming out, and stick with and watch it and really make up my mind on it from start to finish, and have and not be kind of in the ether with it anymore. But I have to say, just circling back, that interview was great. He showed one thing that I was really impressed with Scott Wells was his willingness to improve. He knew there was an issue. He was getting acting lessons on set, all that kind of thing. It wasn't that he was just turning up and dialing in a performance and expecting to get paid and shoot off to the next job. He legitimately wanted to improve, and that's always commendable, I think.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And I like a lot of actors in this first season, I honestly feel like had they kept him, he probably would have continued to get better. But anyway, not to worry. We'll skim over this next few. So Lana is really excited to see her father. She hasn't seen him in 2 years, and the plane is just about to land. And there's a problem. The landing gear won't engage. We get more really bad rear projection. Alan's shaking his head again.
Yeah, because like to be fair, there's a kind of an insinuation by the professor's assistant that they're lucky to have kind of gotten back this far. They were expecting, you kind of get the thing that there might be some curse or something. It's kind of the seeds are planted at this point. And the rear projection is awful. But overall, I was impressed with this scene.
Yeah, I didn't mind it. Yeah, so basically the landing gear won't open. We see the shot of the little wheel getting stuck as it's trying to come out of the trap door under the plane or whatever you call it. And a bit of a plot hole here in that the people on the ground seem to know that the plane is in trouble, which I watching it today, I was kind of like, how do they even know that there's anything wrong? Question mark. Is it
not announced on the speakers that there's an issue to clear the runway?
Maybe
I think it's announced on the speakers, and there's definitely, you can hear sirens and stuff.
Yeah, well, we see these lovely stock shots of ambulances just to pad out the Act 1 a little bit there. And yeah, so we cut to a break and then we come back and we get some really just gorgeous Kevin Kiner synth rock as season 1 synth rock as Clark starts to step away to change into Superboy. We're waiting. Yeah, I think I know what you're going to say.
The hug and roll, I really appreciate it with Lana.
The hug and roll.
The friends hug and roll. So Lana's very upset.
Excellent.
And she's tugged in, and the tears in, and he's there, and he's like, and it's like 3 seconds too long where he's trying to figure out how am I going to get rid of this girl, and then he kind of hugs her, and then Ross Geller fashion rolls her over to TJ, and then he starts pointing up, going, "Oh, isn't this awful?" as he's stepping away. Loved all of that. Loved it.
Love it. I didn't love that we don't get a super transformation.
Yeah, me too.
We don't get a shirt rip. I think he just walks behind something and then he's Superboy. And he doesn't even do it in the same shot. So yeah, so that was a bit disappointing. But we get a kick-ass wire work shot here. He takes off and it looks fantastic. It does cut to some pretty awful rear projection after that, but the wire work is where this show earns its roses, and it looks gorgeous. The
wire work of episode 1, I legitimately felt was better than any of the wire work I had ever seen in Lois and Clark over 4 seasons. Like,
I'm inclined to agree with you.
The takeoffs and the landings. There's a landing later on in front of a car. Like 10 out of 10. You can tell these guys were pros. Yeah. The rear projection stuff is a bit dodgy. There's the part later on where he's flying beside a car and it's a bit awkward. But those takeoffs and landings are top tier stuff.
Top tier. I completely agree. Superboy pulls out the landing gear and, Professor Lang is saved. Lana's reunited with her dad. TJ's snapping pics. And she's grateful. She has this line where she says she's grateful that he even recognizes her because it's been so long. And then he quickly kind of ditches her and has to go back to his work straight away. And she gets upset. And then meanwhile, we see Lex and Leo kind of plot to steal the jewel off in the background. And Scott Wells is doing some lovely moustache twirling there. He's just holding his index finger up like he's kind of testing the air. Lana confides in Clark. I don't know about this scene now. She confides in Clark, her best and closest friend, I guess. And we do find out that they're both from Smallville in this episode. Again, that could be a clue as to why this was first, and that there's a little bit of background context given there. We find out that Clark and Lana grew up together in Smallville, but TJ didn't. TJ's from Metropolis and he's Perry White's son. We find all that out in this episode.
Now, I completely missed that the first time I saw this episode, that he's Perry White's son. I must have missed that line because my jaw dropped here when I was like, he's, and then I was like, is he TJ White? Is that his name? And I looked up and he was TJ White. Yeah. And I completely passed me by that TJ is meant to be Perry's son.
Now, I would say that they kind of waste that a bit. They don't do anything with it, but we'll get into that in other episodes. But so Lana's confiding in Clark that her father cares more about his work than her, which is totally justified based on what we've seen so far. And then Clark, being a bit of an ass, he's like, "Oh, you should give your father a break." It's like, well, it really sounds like Lana's had a shitty childhood because her dad's always away with work, Clark. Like, maybe you should be a bit more supportive.
Lana explains that her mother put up with it for a while and then she left. And then I'm almost sure she says that her father has been gone for 2 years.
Yes.
So that kind of goes towards the didn't think you'd recognize me kind of thing. But it's such a trope. We spoke about this recently on another episode of something where like it's such a trope of the 80s and 90s that like these dads who are working all the time are just pieces of shit. Now, to be fair, dads. this guy is literally gone for years apparently. But like Jimmy Olsen's father in Lois and Clark is the same. Every 90s Disney movie is the same, when it comes to Home Alone, or I know that's not Disney, but Tim Allen and the Santa Claus, all that kind of stuff. It's such a trope that Dad has to work all the time. He's a scumbag.
Pretty much. And another classic trope of the 80s and 90s. What do you do when you find out that your friend is having personal problems with their family? You get involved.
Yeah.
So Clark and TJ start trying to mastermind a way to repair the relationship between Lana and her father. And TJ has one of the weirdest lines of dialogue in the episode. Do you remember this?
No.
He says to Clark, "I'd give my right hand up to my armpit to help Lana." It's just a weird. It's like, who would say that anyway?
Is it a part of season 1 as it progresses that TJ has a bit of a crush on Lana as well, or is that just kind of not addressed?
No, that's not really. We do see TJ hit it off with other babes, but not Stacey Highjoke, unfortunately. So we see the titular Jewel of Techacal. Do you like that? The titular Jewel of Techacal.
Yeah, I liked it.
In this crappy little museum exhibit room. And it starts, we've already alluded to the fact that it might be cursed and all this kind of stuff. And it starts a very strange, very cheap-looking indoor tornado. And various bits of paper fly harmlessly around the room. And Clark, in the show's defense, Clark stops a support beam that's about to fall. He stops that from killing Professor Lang. And Professor Lang's assistant, Gerald... He reveals that they were warned not to take the jewel, as so many American and British invaders so often are. But Professor Lang fobs him off, saying that the jewel is too important as it adds to the world's knowledge. I thought that was a bit vague.
Two things about this. Number one, I kind of expected the jewel to be kryptonite. That's the first thing.
Okay.
Number two, the assistant guy really reminded me of, we're going way back now, the assistant guy kind of reminded me of the assistant in the Broadway musical. Remember the professor's assistant who Lois falls in love with?
Vaguely, yes. Yeah, Jim, was that his name?
Jim, I think. Yeah, I was wondering, and there's no way that they went back to that wetland, but that just made me laugh. But I was full sure that the crystal was going to be kryptonite.
Well, I'll tell you something, a theory I have. The jewel does look not unlike the prop that they use for kryptonite later in this very season. Yeah. So I suspect that it is the same prop.
And this, the effect for kryptonite in Superboy is kind of, they just put this green glow over it. You can kind of see that it's pasted over, that it's not actually green in camera, as far as I can recall. So yeah, that would make sense.
So there's a scene after this where Lana and her father reconcile, and it's pouring rain. It's absolutely pouring rain, and they shoot it in a way where I kind of suspect that maybe they didn't think it was going to be raining, but they had to shoot the scene anyway. And it's just because it's one of those things where you can't really see the rain in some shots. And then in other shots, the actor's hair is like soaking wet, and then in other shots it's not. It really feels like one of those things where they just goofed and they were like, guys, we just have to shoot it anyway. I'm sorry. Okay. Tries to get through to her, but then she gets through to her, and Lana's like, oh well, why don't you join me for dinner tonight? And he immediately says, oh Lana, I'm so sorry, I can't leave the jewel. And Lana is heartbroken again, and Lex is watching on.
Well, to be fair to him, this is his life's work. Yes. And it's just been torn apart by a tornado. And he literally says to her, I have to put everything back together for the exhibit, and then we can meet up, and then we can do something once I get this done, which I didn't think was too unfair.
Not unfair, but the problem I have is we end the scene on her like visibly heartbroken and crying again, and then we immediately go to this other scene where Professor Lang's arriving into the exhibit with a big smile on his face, and he goes, oh, something tells me everything's going to be all right. And you're like, what? Like, it's like there's a scene missing or something. He then has a mysterious seizure, presumably another effect of the Jewel's mysterious curse. And we cut to a worried Lana, Clark, TJ, and Gerald at the Shuster University Medical Center, I think, or just the hospital.
I think that's right. I think that's right.
Gerald obviously suggests that all of this is down to the Jewel. If only Superboy could help. And we have this really weird moment where Clark's like, oh, well, I can contact Superboy, which is fine. He does that in other Superman stuff. But they do this weird close-up on his face. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
And
I don't know what that was about.
it's I don't know what they were going for there. It fades into a map of the fictional Techacal. And then we just cut to Lex breaking into the exhibit and easily stealing a lot of the artifacts.
So this is my question here. Is this like a pre-crisis Lex where he isn't rich because he says that the jewels will be worth $1 million, which doesn't seem like a lot of money for Lex Luthor to me. But then later on, when he writes off a Mustang, he's like, I'll just buy her another car and sell this piece of crap. So I was wondering, is this Lex rich or not?
So, couple of things to say there. So Scott Wells actually in that interview with Ed Gross that we talked about, he said that the character biog that he'd been given was that his Lex Luthor's father was the third richest man in the world. Oh. So at this point, Scott Wells was working with the assumption that Lex was rich. Yes. Okay. So he's kind of a weird blend of pre-crisis Lex and post-crisis Lex.
Because he's quite preppy, like the way he's dressed and the way he carries himself. You know, he is that kind of a 80s douchebag bully, antagonist.
100%. And he alludes to being rich a lot in the show. And like we see, he has very kind of, very expensive kind of hobbies and stuff like that. I just think it's amazing that this is something that's going to be coming up a lot on this rewatch show. Superboy has a lot of like weird specific similarities with Smallville, where it's like Superboy did it first, and like really, really specific things. And one of them, maybe the very first one, is the idea that Lex's father was wealthy. Like that had never happened before in the comics, and and in the post-crisis comics, Lex came from poverty, and they would kind of retcon it later on in Superboy, where I won't get into that yet. But like at this point in the show, we're told that Lex has a really rich father. And the next time we would see that in any version of Superman was Smallville. So that's point one on the Smallville similarities tally board. We'll get to that at the end of the show.
And the Superboy did it first.
Superboy did it first. Superboy did it first board. Yes, that's what we're going to call it. So Lex breaks into the exhibit, steals a lot of the artifacts. Superboy arrives, of course, because Superboy arrived to take the jewel back to where it came from, and he meets Lex there. And he sees Lex with the box. And this, your point about it being similar to Kryptonite here. Lex is holding a lead box with the jewel in it, and he says, "Surely a super person like yourself can see through a lead box." It's a really strange delivery. A lot of really strange deliveries in the dialogue in this episode. But yeah, Superboy can't see through the box, takes it off Lex, opens it, and we get the classic Superman the movie Kryptonite shit attack. Even though it's not kryptonite, it's like this weird kind of shitty 80s kind of purple sparkly effect comes out and starts choking.
It's like something out of The Fog, the film, the John Carpenter's The Fog, kind of comes out and just makes him sick. And so then I was wondering for a split second, is it like a white kryptonite or something like that? But I'd say it's just the curse, basically.
It's the curse, it's magic, and Superboy's vulnerable to magic, it's that kind of thing.
It.
It's poorly defined, and it doesn't really make sense why he would be inflicted with the curse in this moment when he was trying to actually return the jewel to where it came from. But I don't think we're supposed to think about that, Alan.
As a scene, the first meeting of Superboy and Lex Luthor.
Yes, good point.
Very wooden on both sides. Very
yes,
I thought.
Very much so.
John is not. I know John improves as well. Not his greatest performance in that kind of first scene of the two. When you think of all the different, Superman Lex Luthor interactions or their first meetings in various media, whatever, it's probably on the bottom of that scale.
Yeah, I'm trying to recall the Kirk Allen one, and I can't right now. But yeah, I would say if the Kirk Allen one isn't better than this. Or if the Kirk Allen one is better than this, then this is the very worst first meeting between Lex and Superboy or Superman. We cut back to Lana. She's by her father's bedside. He's conscious again, but he's kind of fading, and he apologizes to her for all the important things he's missed out on. He passes out again, and his heart rate shoots up. So the tension is ramping up. Then we really, really strange moment here. We cut back to Superboy. He wakes up from the curse. He's cured again. And we get an internal monologue.
Yeah. So that's another question I was going to ask, because there's no indication of internal monologues up to that point. And I was wondering, is that something that continues throughout season one? Because I don't remember it any of the season one episodes that I've seen.
No, it never. I don't know if it ever appears. You get really strange, sloppy use of a narrative device there. That's just like,
but like it's not even
out of
necessary
nowhere.
because he wakes up from the ground. He's obviously been knocked out. He wakes up from the ground. He kind of shakes his head. He gets up to his feet and he runs out the door. And we don't need it explained to us that he's going after Lex Luthor.
If I can guess what happened there, I think Elias Salkind or whoever was watching this and went, it isn't clear enough what he's doing or what realization he's making, and we need to spell it out.
Now, it's not our first internal monologue in the Superman universe. Obviously,
No.
we have Margot Kidder doing her famous internal monologue in Superman the movie. But I don't remember Superman ever doing one before.
I think we need to go back into Superman the movie and replace that dialogue with just John Newton talking about the Jewel of Techacal and see, because I know there are people who don't like that scene, so maybe that might make it better. You talked about this scene earlier on. Superboy chases after Lex and Leo in their lovely Ford Mustang, and we hear that it's Leo's sister's. I never asked you about Leo, by the way. What do you think of Leo in this?
He's the stand-in Otis, really, isn't he?
Yes, totally.
Again, stiff enough. Doesn't have a lot to work with, which is fair enough. He's just, henchman number one. I know he's in more episodes with Lex and stuff, and I think he even appears in the first Sherman Howard episode as well, doesn't he?
He does, yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you in particular though, because you had a hairstyle like this in the 80s. So, what do you think
I was
about
6, Rob. Yeah, I had the a business at front, party at the back.
it is a full-on action-packed 80s perm/mullet. It is a thing.
It is, yeah.
A thing of hideous beauty.
It's full coming to America. That whatever that stuff was that they put in the hair, that curl stuff that they put in the hair. Yeah, it's full. Like, he looks like my Aunt Susan.
Leo, by the way, is played by an actor named Michael Mano, and I believe he is now he's a real estate guy. I think he still lives in Florida, and he does have a YouTube channel. And maybe, just maybe, we might actually get him on this at some stage.
That'd be great. Yeah, that'd be great. It'd be great to get some of these guys on the show, yeah.
Shout out to Superboy The Legacy, the other definitive Superboy podcast, and they have had him on, I believe, more than once, and he seems like a very nice guy, very enthusiastic about his time on the show. But yeah, so that's Leo. Go ahead.
You can cut this out. It's not Superboy Beyond.
Oh God, it is called Superboy. What did I call it?
Superboy The Legacy.
Superboy, oh yeah, God, yeah, they're always changing their name. The Superboy's chasing after them, very very similar to the scene in Superman 4, where he's chasing after Lex and Lenny in the car there, but and Milton Keynes, but just like that, he easily catches up to them. Because they only appear to be traveling at like 30 miles per hour.
Well, to be fair, they're driving at like 30 miles an hour, whatever, 30 kilometers an hour, whatever, from depending on whatever region you're from. And he's behind them, and then they kind of look back a few times, and then they decide, you know what we might do? We might find fourth gear, and they go into fourth gear, and they take off. And I'm like, they're still not going really fast. Like they do have a clip of them. They cut to them kind of going around a corner in a cop car. Does that classic thing where the car speeds by and the cop car turns on the lights and goes after them. But I'm still surprised that Superman lost them at all, because they drive up. Now, to be honest, like, I don't know why we never think about this in the police business, but like 2 traffic cones in the middle of the road, and they were like, whoa, we better turn back. So that they slam on the brakes and they go back, and they're like, they've lost the cop before Superboy kind of catches up with them again. So the choreography of this is all over the place.
The choreography's all over the place, and also it's such an empty looking road. Like, it isn't even a road. It looks like they're in the middle of a swamp, and it's just like a perfectly clean white road that would only exist in like a movie studio. And then just this comically placed traffic cones in the middle of the road for no reason.
It's only like 2, I think.
And then they come around a corner and like in this like absolutely, I was about to say barren. It's like a lush looking kind of swamp land, but there's nothing else to see for miles, just green. And then all of a sudden there's this fruit stand in the middle of the road, and they crash into that. It's like something out of a comedy. Like, I'm thinking our American listeners won't know this, but there's a show here called Father Ted. And there's one of the like iconic episodes of that show is like the priest in a milk float, and he crashes into a bunch of cardboard boxes that are just randomly in the on the road.
It's the Spin on Speed, isn't it?
And like that is a spoof of these action car chases, and this literally plays like a spoof. It's so funny. And
I can't wait to go into work and just propose, guys, I figured out this whole, we don't need to be chasing these guys anymore.
No.
Traffic cones.
Just in the middle of the road. And God, you mentioned the police car there. This will always be funny forever to me now. Every time I see police cars, especially in season 1 of this show.
After
John Newton.
Yeah.
I was talking to him on the show, and he mentioned that to save money, they just got the extras to drive police cars, and they were like rental cars that they just put a couple of and if you look at this, it looks like a white rental car that they put a couple of decals and like a prop siren on top of. It doesn't look like a real cop car when you really look at it. And like the extras just had to drive these, and they were getting them to do all these like stunts and like donuts and like crash turns and handbrake turns and all this stuff. And then there was one time where they came around too fast, and the wheel came or the hubcap came spinning off or something like that.
The best part of that interview was just John Newton literally just losing the run of himself, pissing himself laughing. Yeah, that was very
funny.
Very funny.
So Lex crashes the Stang into the water, which I was impressed by. I mean, a Mustang is not a cheap car, even in the 80s. So crashing it into the water. And then, even more impressive, Superboy pulls it out of the water.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty well done.
That's an actual thing that you have to do. Like, I'm guessing they didn't just have someone like pressing reverse on the pedals under. I'd say they had to use some kind of a wire or a crane or something.
I'd imagine there was some kind of a retractable cable attached to it. Yeah, that would have had to have been. Yeah.
And then I don't know, is this the shot you were talking about? This is probably my favorite wire work shot of the episode. It's Superboy in the aforementioned completely sterile, clean white road, and there's nowhere to hide, and he just steps into the air and flies off, and it just looks amazing.
Open palm, straight up, and just takes off. And
gorgeous.
Again, like compared to obviously Adventures of Superman is 35 years before this, or however many years it was before this, 40 years before this. Lois and Clark is a few years away, and I can't think of very much that I would compare to the wire work and the takeoffs here. I think it's really, really, really strong.
These are
in camera effects as well, like just so great.
And that's what makes them timeless and beautiful. And if we haven't mentioned it before, these are the same wire work crew that worked on Superman 1, 2, and 3 and Supergirl. Came back for the Superboy show, and it really, really shows. Yeah. Now, we have heard from both actors on different occasions that both actors nearly died because it was multiple times. I think Gerard Christopher nearly crashed into telephone wires one time.
Did he not say that he was almost struck by lightning one time?
He was always struck by lightning, and then John Newton nearly crashed into the ground because someone didn't grab the cable in time or something. So it was a little bit haphazard in that sense, and I don't think it was probably monitored quite as well as the Reeve movies were. But then I guess they were probably doing it a lot more on this show. They were probably doing it like every day, so it's crazy. Like, of course accidents were going to happen. So Professor Lang recovers, he and Lana embrace, and it's a real kind of like, oh yeah, that's that relationship solved. And Clark and TJ do this really wicked sick 1980s high five spin. Did you catch this?
No, but we should start doing it, man.
We should start doing it. Next time I see you in real life, like they do a high five, and then Clark just does a little spin in one spot, and it's just gorgeous. Yeah. And then Clark has this kind of one-liner where he says, "I like to think love is a little bit stronger than magic or a curse or something."
Yeah, and then TJ asks him at some point about letting him know how he contacted Superboy because he'd like to get hooked up with the same system or whatever it is, and we get a bit of a fourth wall break.
Yes, we do. Clark responds, "Oh, same way I always do. Look in the yellow pages under S." And then he looks straight at the camera. I don't think he winks. He just smiles.
He doesn't wink. No. TJ walks away and he just kind of looks up at the camera. Real, classic nod back to George Reeves a little bit. The kind of thing that George would do at the end of an episode. The little wink to the camera or whatever. But yeah, I thought it was interesting.
So did I, and I'm going to write down fourth wall breaks in our tally board, but I suspect this might be the only one in the whole series. so let's keep an eye on that. It
might have been John Newton just checking to make sure the audience is still there.
Okay, so Alan, we're going to go to our we're going to do our letter grade score first, and then go to our tally board. So Out of 5 Jewels of Techacal, what would you give the Jewel of Techacal? Season 1, Episode 1 of Superboy the series.
This is tough.
It's not really.
It has to be 1, really. And the 1 is for the wire work, the flight, the in-camera effects that we do get. The suit looks great. Newton looks great. Everything else, like, overall, I thought I liked the plot to a certain extent. Like, I liked the classic investigative journalism element to it that we get at the start. But I thought, the villain was weak. I thought it lacked any kind of real stakes, especially for a first episode of a show. I like the fact it was lighthearted, it was adventurous, it kind of reminiscent of the George Reeves show in that way, but I thought it lacked depth and seriousness. I thought it felt, look, it is dated. I was going to say it feels dated. It is dated. It's 37 years ago, so it is dated. Overall, I have to, look, it laid the groundwork for later, stronger seasons. There's no doubt about that, but it feels like a rough draft of what Superboy would maybe become in later seasons, I thought. I think, like, looking at it in 2025, it has the same vibes, I thought, as a not so great fan film. Now, I have to say, I still enjoyed sitting down and watching it. Like, it was the kind of bad that I was laughing as I was watching it. Not necessarily at it, but I was legitimately enjoying how bad it was to a certain extent.
Bingo.
Like, I wasn't turning around going, oh, this is absolute muck, turn this off. I knew what I was stepping into. I had seen this a few years ago before. I knew it wasn't great. I knew I wasn't going to get, like, season 1, episode 1 of Superman and Lois. But I legitimately had a fun experience watching it. But again, I know how much better the show does become as it goes on. I maybe one actually feels a little bit harsh. If I could give it maybe 1.5 or something like that, I'd be happy with that.
You've said so many interesting things there. The whole thing of, like, I know this is bad, but I had fun watching it. Like, that is like the ultimate descriptor of Superboy season 1 for me. It's so much fun. Like, and part of the fun is that it is bad, but then, like, another part of the fun is just like the 80s kind of college vibe of it all, and you find yourself wanting to root for the show. You want it to be good, and then sometimes it is, and you're like, oh man, this is kick-ass. You kind of don't get that schlocky feel with the other seasons as much, and I think that's a big part of why I love this first season so much. But even for me, I think this one's a bit of a tough one. I rarely come back to this episode. It's really, really stiff. It doesn't have the charm of a lot of the rest of season 1, and I find it so frustrating because this is the one that when people bought the DVDs in 2006, this is the first episode they watched. And they probably made it like minutes in and just went, what the fuck is this? So I can't but not give it a 1. It's one of the worst episodes of the show.
Yeah, 1. Yeah.
It's a dreadful introduction to the show. And it's a big part of why I've done this particular format for this podcast. It's like, I as much as I find a charm in season 1, I don't want to spend like 20 plus episodes saying, oh, don't worry, it gets better later on. I want to give people a flavor of both. I want to show them the good stuff as well, the genuinely good stuff.
One thing we didn't mention, I don't think, and this doesn't show her off as great as other episodes do later on, but Stacey Hyjuk is a very strong Lana Lang.
Yes, she is. Very much so.
She's a little bit of I won't say damsel in distress in this episode because she's just upset about her father. She doesn't actually need any rescuing herself, I don't think. But she is, like, acting wise, she's fine from day one. I know her more so later on from, like, Sequest DSV and things like that later on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have to say, I'm not a huge Lana Lang. I like Annette O'Toole in Superman 3. I'm not a huge fan of the Lana Lang character overall. But I really do like her performance in Superboy in all 4 seasons.
As a nice segue into the next thing we're going to discuss, I would make the argument that in seasons 1 and 2 she's playing Lana Lang, and then in seasons 3 and 4 she's kind of just playing Lois. But
fair that's fair.
We'll quickly go to our tally board before we go. First appearances, we have one which is well, no, actually, technically it's the entire cast of the show. But
I was just about to say.
Other than Clark, TJ, and Lana, we also have Lex and Leo. So I'm going to bump them together as one. Super saves. We actually only have one. It's the save
The
with
plane.
the plane at the start. I mean, technically, we could count Clark saving Dr. Lang as two as well when he saves him from the beam falling. So we'll say
Yeah,
super
to be fair,
saves.
but
is
you
two.
don't really see that on screen.
No,
like
no.
there's no real. I don't think I'd count that.
Superboy did it first. We have one, just the insinuation that Lex is rich. I'm not going to give it to this episode. I think we bring that in later on. I don't think that counts just yet. And then fourth wall breaks, we have one.
Yeah.
So iconic wire work, I'm going to put down 2. I thought there was 2 really good wire work shots in this. There was the one at the start, and then there was the one out in the middle of the road later on. They both looked amazing.
Do we have any shirt rips in this episode?
We don't have any shirt rips yet. No.
Okay.
No. So
That's
no
definitely
shirt
one for the tally board. I love me a good shirt rip.
As do I. So we are now going to skip. We will leave the 1980s behind, and we will skip forward 2 years to October 6th, 1990 for Bride of Bizarro Part 1. Technically the first episode of The Adventures of Superboy, when they heavily revamped the show. They got a new supervising producer is the title, but I think it was effectively a new showrunner in Julia Pistor. They also got a lot of involvement from Stan Berkowitz. It was a big deal on the animated shows later on. And yeah, that we've talked about it before on All Star Superfan. Like, it's like a light switch goes on. The show just instantly, the production values like shoot way up. Everything just looks way more professional. The acting is better. The writing is better. The stories are better. The cinematography, man. Like, you compare the way the last one was shot to the way this one was shot, it's night and day. I've heard Elias Salkind say that like a big part of this show being cheap to produce was that they shot it on tape, and that helped them with some of the special effects because they were able to hide stuff in a way that they wouldn't be able to do if they shot it on film. I suspect that when we get to season 3, they actually did shoot it on film because it just looks so much more lavish.
It does, yeah.
And
it does.
And we're watching it in SD, by the way. There's still they haven't made HD versions of this show yet, and I suspect they never will. But it just looks so good. So I suppose I'll very quickly ask you, do you know what I'm talking about in terms of the difference, the kind of contrast? What's your experience with the Adventures of Superboy?
It's literally night and day. Now, I don't want to oversell it. Like, it's not Schindler's List that we're dealing with here. Like,
well, it's just no.
No, like, there is, if you compare it to season 1, and like, just say for argument's sake, this is season 1. Well, it is the case. Season 1, episode 1. Season 3, episode 1. The difference is huge. Like, you can really see it straight off. You cannot miss it. Saying that, like, comparing it to other shows that would follow on afterwards, you can still see it doesn't have the budget of subsequent Superman shows, like even Lois and Clark, which had a much bigger budget again, and Smallville, obviously, which had a much bigger budget again. But the improvement is significant. I mean, it's straight off the bat with this episode. It's straight away. It's more mature. It's more cinematic storytelling, I thought. It's moving away from the campiness to a large degree. It's literally Superman in Metropolis now.
Pretty much
with Superboy. Yeah. I mean, he's not working the Daily Planet. He's working for a substitute for the Daily Planet. But Lana's there, like you said earlier. She's basically Lois Lane. There's basically a Perry White in it. There's a huge upgrade in terms of Lex Luthor. Yeah. We'll get into that when we talk about Lex.
Would you agree though that the charm, maybe the kind of youthful charm of season 1 and 2 is kind of gone now, though, in the way that they just sort of immediately shift gears and sort of just make it into a Superman show? Like, do you lose out on some of that feeling of like Superboy in college with his skateboard and his posters on the wall and his rock music?
You do, but it feels like a proper show now. Like,
okay,
it feels like an actual show. I thought. Like, I have no doubt. I watched this, and it's not my first time seeing the Bride of Bizarro, but I sat down when I watched it last night in my media room. I sat up and I watched it, and straight away I knew the answer to the question that I had asked myself in regards to season 1. If I had seen this at 8 or 9 years of age, I would guarantee you that I would have the same passion and love for it that people like yourself and Tom Gallagher and other fans have for it. It really would have just hit me like a bulldozer back in 1991, 1992. You can really see the production value increase. Even the acting is far better from the supporting cast. Whatever about Gerard Christopher and John Newton, we can talk about that. But in terms of the supporting cast in general, it's night and day.
Absolutely, and I completely agree with you there. By the way, what you said about when you meet these passionate Superboy fans and that they're talking about how much they love the show and how much it meant to them growing up. Yeah. You absolutely can understand that watching this episode as opposed to the last one we watched. And
not only that, but this feels like a genuine comic book program.
Come to life. Yeah.
Maybe more so than Lois and Clark ever felt.
Oh, I think this feels more like a real comic book than Lois and Clark.
Like if you were reading the comics at the time and you're reading that post-crisis John Byrne stuff, and not only John Byrne but everybody who came after him, Dan Jurgens, everybody else. If you're Marv Wolfman, if you're reading those books, in the late 80s, early 90s, and you see Bizarro appear in, say, those first few issues of Man of Steel, and then you turn this on, it is like, to this day, it is still by far the most accurate version of Bizarro we've ever had on television, and that alone is worth checking this series out. I'm so impressed about the level of thought and effort, the makeup. I think Barry. That's one thing I want to. Is it Barry Myers or Douglas Myers?
One of them is his real name and one of them is his stage name. I think his real name is Douglas Myers.
Yeah, but he's credited as Barry. This. They took what I think is the right approach. They cast two different actors. And that might have just been a budgetary thing. They cast two different actors. Jared Christopher is obviously Superboy, Clark Kent, and Barry Myers is Bizarro, and he's covered in comic accurate makeup. Suit looks great on him. Like, I have to say, 10 out of 10.
Mm. So very quickly, synopsis: Bizarro returns from deep space. Yeah. So the format of this podcast obviously is that we're jumping around, and I kind of figured that format would work because. There's not a lot of continuity in the show.
Yeah.
And then straight away we jump into season 3 and it's laden with continuity. So apologies for that. For anyone listening to this and watching the show for the first time, apologies. There is an unusual amount of continuity in this episode, but that doesn't apply for most of season 3. Bizarro returns from deep space, enters into a deadly pact with Lex Luthor. Lex will create a bride for Bizarro in exchange for a supply of kryptonite which can kill Superboy. So we have Bizarro, we have Lex Luthor, we have kryptonite, we're off to the races. What do you think the IMDb rating for this episode was, Alan?
7.5.
8 out of 10, baby.
Close. I was going to say 8 and I thought that might be a bit too high.
So we briefly mentioned the intro sequence earlier on. It's significantly different to the one in season 1, and actually the music has changed. It's tweaked a little bit. Did you notice that?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did notice that.
So I'll do a little rendition for you now. So in the season 1 and season 2, it's dun 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 dun, dun. And now in this season 3, they've changed it to dun 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 dun, dun, which has always irked me a little bit. I much prefer the season 1 version, but. So it's sort of similar-ish to the movies. That there's like text kind of coming at you slowly. Yep. It's like Alexander Salkind presents. They really big up Alexander Salkind.
They do.
Like tenuous involvement.
He really didn't have too much involvement in this in any way, shape, or form.
He had nothing to do with this except that he owned the rights. Like Elia barely had anything to do with the show at this stage. It was mainly, but they still traded on Alexander Salkind's name. They act like he's like Stan Lee or something. But yeah, so we see Alexander Salkind presents, and then we're kind of in space, but we're getting these like screens coming at us of sort of like
almost like little Phantom Zone kind of
actually
with clips of Krypton and Smallville and Pa Kent and all these kind of things to catch us up.
Good point. I never thought of that. It is like the Phantom Zone in the movies. Yeah. I'm trying to remember actually the shot of. And this is a challenge for Lois and Clark as well. The shot of the ship actually flying off from Krypton. I don't know what episode that's from. I must keep an eye out for that.
Does it actually show the ship flying, or does it just show the planets?
Oh man, you have me. I'm wondering now. Am I mixing up my Superman shows? Am I thinking of the opener from Lois and Clark where you see the ship flying off from Krypton?
You definitely see the ship in Lois and Clark, but I think I could be wrong. But I think in this you see the one planet and maybe a moon or something in front of it. There's kind of two planets or something in it. I'm almost. I don't remember seeing the ship in it.
It's something to keep an eye out. So that's our intro sequence. We got a couple of nice clips. We got a big shirt rip. Not my favorite shirt rip. It's a very. He's wearing a shirt that's like the size of a tent, and he's like buried in the shirt when he rips it off, and he's clearly not wearing the cape underneath, which is always a bit of a bugbear.
I hate when they do that. There's a few episodes of Lois and Clark that do that as well.
We open on another beautiful day in Capital City. Nice stock footage of kind of just Orlando, Florida here, and they're very much setting the scene of, oh yeah, we are in the big city now. It's capital city, because in the previous seasons it was like Seagullville, and it was just Shuster University was the setting.
This isn't your father's Superboy.
It's not. This ain't your dad's Superboy, and we never really got like a city setting in those earlier ones. Whereas now it's like, oh yeah, we're in the big city. It's essentially Metropolis, as you said, but it's called Capital City. And we cut to this daytime chat show called The Judy Show. And they're airing their first episode on their new satellite link.
Now, I did like the fact that it's Judy Donatello. And it's obviously a spin, because there was it's obviously a take on, there was a talk show host at the time who wore, in America, I can't think of her full name, but she had these bright red glasses, and her surname, I'm almost sure, was Raphael. So this is Donatello.
Oh my God, that's a great point. I think Sally Jesse Raphael.
Sally Jesse Raphael. That's it. And this is Judy Donatello.
That is a goddamn excellent point, Alan. This is why we brought you on for the first episode. That's excellent. I never thought about that. That's absolutely what they did there. Judy Donatello, amazing. So the episode is all about bizarre relationships, and this.
She must have been, like, the direction must have been, just get the word bizarre in as often as possible to make this work, or else it won't work.
There's no other word for it. Bizarre. She says bizarre about 7 or 8 times in the space of a minute of screen time. Meanwhile, we cut to a very, very, very different Lex Luthor and his Moll, Darla, and they are watching this. They're hiding away. They're on the run from the law. They're in their hideout. And Lex is trying to think of ways to kill Superboy, but Darla's watching the show, and she's trying to get his attention. Nice bit of kind of wig action here. Did you notice this, Alan?
Yeah, I did. He's wearing like a blonde wig. It's meant. He never. I don't think he ever takes it off in the episode, but it's clearly meant to be a wig that everybody.
Well, no, he does. He takes it off in this. He takes it off in this scene, and then for the rest of the episode, he's wearing the wig again. So they do this. Right, okay. They do this a lot in these Superboy episodes, where it's like they'll get him to wear a bald cap for one scene to establish that he's bald, but then in the rest of the episode, he's wearing a wig. But in fact, it's Sherman Howard's actual hair.
It's his actual. It's a nice way of getting around it.
And we have to address the fact that Lex Luthor is played by a different actor here now. So he's Sherman Howard. Again, bit of continuity. In season 2, they switch Lexes, and there's a whole reason for it in the world of the show. Lex also loses his hair over the course of the show. So a bit of continuity going on here. But suffice to say, Sherman Howard is quite a step up in terms of acting ability. Would you agree?
2 things. Number 1, they come up with an entire plot point about why they recast Lex Luthor, but don't do the same for Superboy, right?
No,
which is one thing. The second thing is Sherman Howard is by far my favorite Joker after Jack Nicholson.
Yeah, that's a fair point. He kind of veers closer to Jack Nicholson's Joker a lot in this. He's still Lex Luthor, and he still does Lex Luthor-y things, and he still has Lex Luthor-y plots, but he does feel a lot like the Joker a lot in this show, and there's a lot of kind of like cackling and laughing and
big grins to the camera and that kind of thing. But I you know what, I say that in jest. His performance, I think, is outstanding. Probably one of the best performances in the entirety of the 4 seasons. Absolutely,
and I think that the sort of Jokerishness of it works for these Adventures of Superboy seasons, where it's darker and noirish, and all the scenes are shot at night, and there's a lot of nice shadowy stuff, and it just works for that world, I think, and he is fantastic. He's one of the best. I think he's one of the best Lex Luthors ever, and he's probably the most underrated because people just don't know him. They're not familiar with the show.
And I've seen him in other things. He's in episodes of Seinfeld. He's a real jobbing actor of the time. And I know he was in one of those George A. Romero zombie movies as well. He played Doug, didn't he?
Man, he's in Day of the Dead, and he is excellent in that film. Truly, truly excellent. It's like a Boris Karloff worthy performance as the zombie. Bub is his name, and he's so good. He's in a couple of Star Treks. Plays a Klingon. He's a Klingon in Voyager, and he plays something else in Next Generation. Definitely. He's in my favorite. He's one of my favorite shows, Melrose Place. He's in an episode of Sabrina. Like you said, he's a real jobbing actor. He popped up a lot in the 80s and the 90s and into the early 2000s.
He would be a great guest to get on the show if you could get him,
because
I'd say he'd have a lot to say about it.
Absolutely, and he did appear on the Comic Book Central podcast talking about Superboy, and he was truly excellent. And it was a case that, like, you know, it was just a gig. He didn't remember it that well, but what he did remember was very interesting, and he had some great insights that I'm going to refer to a little bit as we go through the series. But they're watching the show anyway, and then Bizarro breaks into the studio, so it's obviously some kind of like live broadcast, which is weird because I work in the industry, and these shows, those kinds of like daytime trashy chat shows, typically aren't live. Some of them I guess probably are live. Maybe Ellen is live and Oprah might have been live, but like a lot of the trashier ones I wouldn't have thought were live. I'd say they just shoot them all in a block. Bizarro breaks into the studio, and we have an example of something that occurs a lot in Superboy, where it's like really strange, repetitive Foley, like as in sound effects. Okay. So when he's punching the metal door, it's like the exact same sound of punch each time, and it's like it just, something about it just sounds wrong in your brain. I don't know what it is, but that happens a lot.
It's like children laughing in a Fantastic Four trailer.
Yeah. What?
Do you not notice that when the kids in the new Fantastic Four trailer, when the kids are running to the TV, there's 3 laugh tracks of the kids laughing, but it's the exact same track.
Exact same one. Interesting. And we get Bizarro's theme from Kevin Kiner. It's a really nice kind of horror sort of plink plonk. Dun 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 dun. Love it. So the reason Bizarro is here is when he heard them say Bizarro 70 times, he thought they were talking about him. And he kind of insinuates that he wants a bizarre relationship. He wants a bit of companionship. The last time we saw him, he was just flying off into space on his own. So he's lonely. He needs a mate. Alexa and Darla see this, and Lex starts hatching a plan. He's like, I can use this. We cut to the Bureau for Extra Normal Matters, which looks very much like a newsroom, and it sort of has the hustle and bustle of a newsroom. And every time I see these later episodes, I'm like, why didn't they just have Clark working at a newspaper if they wanted to just do a Superman show? But who knows? I'm guessing, I suspect it had something to do with the weird rights situation around this show, that they weren't allowed to make it too similar to Superman, so they had to make it significantly different enough, and that was how they did it. It's like, oh, it's not a newspaper, it's a government agency.
I would like to know whose idea it was, and whose idea it was to go that, you know, extra paranormal kind of route with it, because, as I said earlier, it's literally 2 years before the X-Files.
Yeah.
Now maybe like on the face of it, it's a great idea in that it gives you all these different story variations of things you can investigate, things you can send Clark off that are otherworldly, so that you don't need to be dealing with real world topics or anything like that. Especially for kids and that. Now there's only so many kind of vampires and werewolves and stuff that you can investigate, I suppose, before it gets a bit repetitive. But I on the face of it, I thought it was a great idea.
I have a couple of theories. Obviously, a lot of people have pointed to the fact that Batman came out the year before this, Batman 89, and they were probably thinking, oh, how do we make the show more like that? That was a phenomenon. It took over the whole world. People, as Kevin Smith always says, people were cutting the Bat logo into their fucking heads. Yeah. It was like the biggest thing in the world. So they have this cheap Superman show. How do they make it closer to that? That's one thing. I also think they were shooting on the Universal Studios theme park lot in Florida, and I'd say they just had a load of horror props, and they were like,
that makes sense.
You know, we've got all these werewolf costumes and vampire stuff and all that. Like, how can we just use all that in the show. So they came up with this bureau for extra.
That makes perfect sense, actually. Yeah,
that's just a theory. I might be wrong on that, but I suspect that came into it a bit. And there's an episode where they literally go to Universal Studios. So as in like in the world of the show, they go to the theme park. So Jackson, so the Clark is giving Dennis Jackson, his boss, he's given articles on a Bigfoot sighting. Dennis Jackson is the de facto Perry White stand-in in this show, and he's kind of just this disgruntled government bureaucrat. He's not like, it's an interesting take on a Perry White type. Like he's not really in a hurry to do his job. He's sort of just looking for, you know, the 9 to 5, get in, get out, and, you know, get the work done at the least amount of stress. He's the ultimate like civil servant.
I was laughing. I think it was one of the subsequent episodes. But I know you always criticize Lane Smith's Perry White because he's always like telling Lois and Clark to take the day off and, you know, go home and relax.
Take some time off, you kids.
And I think it was one of the subsequent episodes that I watched after I watched it's one of the early season 3 episodes where he does the same to Clark. Clark. Oh no, is it this one where Clark throws the pigeon out the window?
It's this
and
very
then he turns
episode.
to Clark
Yeah.
and says, why don't you go home, Clark? I was laughing at. Like, so, it's obviously a thread that runs through these guys.
Jackson needs Clark to find a report on cattle mutilations, and Clark, he's trying to give Clark busy work because he doesn't want him out in the field. He's only an intern, but Clark is like desperate. He wants to go out on a real mission. And he's like, oh, well, find me a report on cattle mutilations. And he assumes it's going to take Clark ages. But, of course, Clark has X-ray vision and he finds it in like 2 seconds. And he's a great line here. And nice bit of linking it back to the earlier seasons as well. Archaeology is my minor in Shuster.
Yeah, liked it. And was that something that was established in the earlier seasons? Did he say that in the pilot or anything?
No, that's just a gag to cover up the X-ray vision.
Excellent. Jared Christopher looks great as well, to be honest.
He does.
Dressed as Clark. I love the suspenders, white shirt, glasses, hair. Looks the part. He's acting from season 2. His portrayal of Clark is very different in season 3 than it is in season 2, as far as I can remember. He's a bit goofier and stuff in season 2, where he's playing it a little bit more straight. Still kind of mild-mannered in that, but, you know, a little bit more straight than he did in season 2. But I liked his portrayal. I always kind of describe Jared Christopher's portrayal as like a super bro kind of. He's kind of like this surfer Superman kind of a guy, you know, real cool, too cool for school almost. But I like it. It's very different to John Newton. But I have no issues with it.
I think I was going to save this for later. I think we're possibly being Jared Christopher is at an unfair advantage here in that he's been playing the part for a year.
Yeah.
And as you alluded to there, in season 2, he's a little bit insufferable and at times unwatchable, I think, because they tried to do this thing where they tried to make his Clark Kent like the Christopher Reeve version, but like a younger college version. So he's talking about his bug collection and his 28 megabyte hard drive and all this stuff.
It's and real 80s Revenge of the Nerds type kind of nerd.
It's like the nerds that Zach, you know, will bully and Saved by the Bell, like just real aggressively obnoxious dork of a nerd. Whereas Christopher Reeve was charming when he did that. Like Gerard Christopher is not, and I think they realized that and they said, okay, tone all that right back and just play it like, you know, kind of a timid, vulnerable, mild mannered, you know, normal guy.
Yeah.
And he's found his groove here, and he's a lot. He's, you know, you like him a lot more in season 3, I think. And Super Bro is a nice. You know, you wouldn't automatically assume this guy is Superman. By the way, it does work as a disguise. But it's toned down a lot from the ridiculous kind of caricature of season 2. So Clark is a bit disheartened when he hears there's going to be a new intern, until he discovers that it's Lana, and they really kind of big up a little bit. They sort of imply now that he definitely has romantic feelings for her.
So this is my question.
Yeah,
Clark asks Lana, well, you know, what are you doing here, Lana? And she's explaining, well, this is where, you know, you get all the answers to everything.
Yeah,
they investigate everything. Does Lana show any interest in that kind of stuff in previous seasons? No.
What do you think?
No, absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
My headcanon is saying that, look, she's in love with Superboy at this point, and he's extraterrestrial. I assume that's not known. I don't even think Superboy knows, the character at this point, that he's extraterrestrial in this part. In this, is it not towards the very end that he finds that out?
I think he knows that he came to Earth in a rocket ship, so he must suspect that he's an alien. Yes.
So my headcanon here is that she wants to get the answers as to Superboy's background and who he is and where he comes from, and this is the closest way she can get to do that.
Yes, exactly.
And she even mentioned something about seeing him again or something like that.
I actually really like that exchange, and it's testament to how much better the writing is at this point. She's saying she's really excited to work there and learn all about these, unexplained phenomena, and hopefully maybe even learn more about Superboy. Yeah. Wouldn't you like to learn more about him, Clark? I would. And then we just have this little moment where Clark sort of like mutters to himself, "So would I." And it perfectly explains what Clark is doing there as well. He doesn't know where he came from, so he's obviously come to this place to try and get answers, which is nice. The Bureau agents learn about Bizarro's interruption at the Judy show. Clark runs to the storeroom, and we get a proper super transformation. Did you like this?
Reminded me very much of the transformation in Superman 3 when he's running behind the fence in the cornfield. He kind of, the suit just kind of disappeared. The civilian clothes just kind of disappear as he's running. I think it's behind a stack of shelves or something, and then he takes off out the window.
Now, it is another. I mentioned the Foley earlier, like the weird sound effects in Superboy when he's using his powers. Sometimes in the movies or in the other shows where he's doing super speed stuff, it'll be a real kind of impactful, like a whoosh. But here, it's in Superboy, for whatever reason, they use this really timid little... It's just this really pissy little sound. It just never sounds great. Anyway, he transforms. We cut back to Bizarro fighting off some guards, some rent-a-cops. He's just throwing them around, just wrestling them. It looks pretty great. A little bit schlocky, but like in a great way. The lighting is fantastic. Superboy arrives, tries to reason with him. Bizarro fights him off and escapes. Again, it's just a real wrestle of a fight. Like it's not it's not General Zod from Superman 2. It's two guys in Universal Studios very kind of throwing each other.
It's different here though because like Superboy does not want to hurt this guy. Like there's a big difference here. Superboy sees Bizarro as this misunderstood being rather than just a bad guy who's they very easily could have done a thing where Superman just wants to beat the shit out of this guy to put him down. It's what they did in the comics at the time, the John Byrne comics. Like there's a point where he's on about him dying and stuff and how he's not even really alive or all that kind of nonsense. But I have to say that the understanding that Superboy has, like this guy is a misunderstood. He's a tragic figure. He's he's a modern day Frankenstein's monster, and I want to help him rather than hurt him or take him down as I would Nuclear Man or whoever else. I like that about it.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And and Superboy was kind of ahead of the curve in that way because, as you said, in the comics they were pretty callous towards Bizarro in a lot of stories.
Man. I was horrified with some of those 50s comic that comic that we read from, I think it was 58 or something like that. I was horrified by the way they spoke about him. This sentient being. Well, he's not really alive anyway, Lois. So
he's not really alive, Lois. We can kill him. It's fine. Back at the Bureau, Clark and the agents learn that the duplicator ray that created Bizarro has been stolen. Now, a bit of continuity again. This episode is loaded with continuity. The duplicator ray did show up in season 2 when they created Bizarro, and it's been stolen. We see it's been stolen obviously by Lex, but we don't know that yet. We see Bizarro sulking on top of a building. Again, just a nice shot. They obviously went up on top of a building for real, and there's Orlando in the background. Some really distinctive buildings. We see Bizarro, he's sulking up there, and he spies what appears to be a Bizarro pigeon. So it's this prop pigeon that like has the same appearance as Bizarro. It's kind of jagged and kind of like angular looking, blocky and white. And we cut back to Lex's hideout. We find out that he's been creating Bizarro homing pigeons to try and lure Bizarro back to him. So it's real kind of weird.
That should do it.
12, yeah. So it's weird, goofy Silver Age stuff, but it also makes sense. There's an internal logic to it.
Yeah, his logic is that he'll release these pigeons, they'll land, Bizarro will see one and follow it back to where it came from.
Yeah,
makes in comic book logic, it makes perfect sense.
Exactly, and it works. Bizarro arrives, and Lex offers to make him a mate in exchange for killing Superboy, and he manipulates. But Bizarro is obviously of childlike intelligence. He manipulates this into thinking that Superboy is the reason that Bizarro is ugly and alone. I love this bit because Lex offers Bizarro brandy and a cigar, And there's just this amazing shot of this poor actor holding brandy and a cigar dressed as Bizarro. And then the best thing is Lex takes it back off him and just starts drinking the brandy and smoking the cigar himself. Classic Lex stuff. And then, so the deal is he's going to get Bizarro to steal some kryptonite to power the duplicator ray. And in the process, Lex learns that Bizarro isn't affected by kryptonite, which is another important bit of continuity.
Because he hands him a lead box. He's like, you can put it in this lead box. And he's like, kryptonite doesn't affect me.
It was just nice. Like it's maybe a little bit clunky, but it serves to remind the viewer of that. But also Lex is able to learn that in the moment. So it's just very kind of functional, economic writing there, I thought.
But he wants Bizarro to kill Superboy as payment for creating this, love interest for him.
Clark stops a Bizarro homing pigeon from exploding at the bureau. This is their way of figuring out that there's something going on with these pigeons, and he pretends to faint. Bizarro steals the kryptonite from a military institute, and we get the kryptonite theme, Alan, in this show. Did you catch that?
I did. I caught it. Yeah.
Do 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 do. Interesting thing, when we hear that in season 1, they actually use it for Lex Luthor, and then they kind of change it to the kryptonite theme later on. But
makes sense. Yeah, makes sense. I liked all that stuff. I liked the scene where Mr. Jackson and Matt are listening to the news and they're talking about the pigeons exploding all over the city and they can't figure it out. The next thing you see the smoke rising from this bird cage because they're looking at this bird. And Clark doesn't have time for any of his shenanigans. He just picks it up, throws it out the window, then it explodes, and then he kind of remembers and pretends to faint. And that's what I was alluding to earlier when I think Mr. Jackson that's his name, isn't it? Yeah, Dennis sends him home for the day. But I liked all that. That was classic Superman, classic Clark Kent stuff.
Absolutely, yeah, classic kind of Superman farce type stuff.
Yeah,
in a good way. I mean farce in the classic like screwball 1930s sense.
Really, really like that.
I like that stuff too. One thing I did notice, I was watching in preparation for this episode. I was watching this episode with earphones on. Okay. And I noticed the sound mix in the bureau scenes is a bit weird. They're clearly playing like ambient room noise just over the scene. Oh. And if you listen out for it, like their sounds are kind of like hustle and bustle in the background, but it's clearly just playing at one, like that they haven't mixed it very well. Like it's playing at one steady volume, and once you hear it, you'll know exactly what I mean. It just it sounds fake is what I'm getting at.
I didn't pick that up now at all. Well, I didn't listen to it with headphones now.
And once you realize, you're like, oh no, it actually just is these 3 people in this room. There isn't like this.
There's nobody out there.
But I love it. And you never would have noticed that on TV in 1991. Like it's just, I'm watching it in a way that it was never designed to be watched. So where were we? Superboy catches up to Bizarro and is immediately weakened by the kryptonite, and we get some lovely 1991 or 1990 green face, which is a thing from the comics. Where Superboy's face would turn green when he's exposed to kryptonite. I just think it looks pretty super cool. Like I wouldn't want them to do it now in a modern Superman thing, but just again back then with their kind of primitive early 90s CG, if you even want to call that, effects that they have. It's just something really, really charming about Superboy's face turning green when he's exposed to kryptonite.
I do like it, and I do like it in the context of the show, but narratively I don't like it because I think it kind of pigeonholes you a little bit. Like there's so many, like anytime there's loads of scenes, say in like the green glow of home in Lois and Clark, when Clark is exposed to kryptonite, if he turned the luminous green, he'd be immediately copped by anybody who's around that there's obviously an issue with it. So I think it kind of prevents you from doing interesting things like that, storytelling wise, narratively. But I do like the effect when it comes to this show. I do like it.
And it's interesting you say that, Alan, because in the episode Kryptonite Kills in season 1 of Superboy the series, they didn't have the green face thing yet. So it's interesting. And they have a scene exactly like that, where Clark faints in the middle of a room full of students and nobody thinks, oh my God, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
Very, very interesting point there. I've written down great Gerard Christopher... Excuse me, I'm not well at the moment. Great Gerard Christopher Payne acting here, where he's exposed to kryptonite, and we get this great as he's falling out of the sky. I just love it, man. I just love it.
I thought it was really good.
And you alluded to it earlier on when Kryptonite shows up on this show. There's this just beautifully shitty 80s glow effect that they have around the Kryptonite, where it's like, Sherman Howard will be holding the Kryptonite in his hand, and his entire hand will just be glowing because of this effect that they have.
It's like it. I don't think it's green in camera. He's obviously holding it, and it's like they uploaded it to the Microsoft Paint app and just kind of spray painted it green.
Exactly.
I say that it sounds like it's awful, but the nostalgia of it and I just really enjoy it. It's really quaint, and I really like it.
And talking about the Foley, the sound effects again, there's just this real soft kind of just this buzzing effect for whenever someone Kryptonite is on screen. They do something similar in Lois and Clark and Smallville, but again, it's like a much more powerful, impactful sound. But on this crappy I say with love, syndicated show, it's just this kind of like feedback sound, and I love it. Really interesting thing happens here. Just a little production goof that I'm sure they were aware of, but they thought no one would notice. We see Bizarro land back in Lex's hideout here. Did you notice anything strange about this?
No, I didn't.
Another fine bit of wire work, but for whatever reason, he's wearing the John Newton costume from season 1. Just for that one shot.
Oh, no, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, you'll notice his trunks are like kind of oddly shaped because I reckon they were probably hiding the harness in there somewhere. And then the S is noticeably smaller and like a slightly different shape. So yeah, he's wearing the John Newton.
Some kind of issue there somewhere behind the scenes.
It's something to do. I'd say it had something to do with whatever crane or wire work thing they were using it for. Whatever reason, they probably needed that suit, and there was probably a thing as well that like they had 2 actors running around in the Superman suit in the same episode, so they probably were limited by the suits they had and stuff. So I
could understand why they do like the backward S or any of that kind of stuff with it. Like obviously they don't have the budget to be making Superman suits or Bizarro suits in particular. But I still think he looked great.
Very quickly, Superboy's lying weakened from the kryptonite, and Bizarro is kind of telling him all this stuff that Lex has lied to him about. So Superboy is learning of Lex's sort of manipulation plot.
Yeah.
Bizarro delivers the kryptonite back to Lex. I wanted to ask you about this. He loads it into the sort of handy-dandy kryptonite power source chamber in the duplicator ray. Did you spot this?
Yeah, it fits perfect. Thank God.
Just absolutely, just perfectly
slides right in.
Slides right in, and I'd love to say that Superboy is the only thing that does this. I feel like that happens a lot in Superman stuff, where kryptonite can just be used as a power source. But like, there's never
kryptonite used as a power source in the Bizarro original episode? Did the Professor use kryptonite as a power source in that episode, though?
A fine question that won't be answered until we get to the battle with Bizarro many months from now. But I don't think so. No,
I don't think so either. To be honest, I don't think so.
Lex creates Bizarro, Darla as a mate for Bizarro, and there's a fucking great shot of Barry Myers in the Bizarro suit here, where he's kind of like walking through the smoke afterwards.
Yeah,
and the way they light the smoke and like they frame his face up and all that, and he just looks great. And he's asking, did it work? Just split second shot, and it looks amazing.
What do you think of Barry Myers' performance in general as Bizarro?
I think he's great. I think he's really good. He's fantastic. Yeah. Well, I mean, for this show and for what it is, and what they asked him to do, and he's buried in this makeup. I'm not super crazy about the specific design of the makeup, but I think they could have. The problem I always have with it is it's really jagged and angular and white, and it looks cool. But they should have contoured it a bit. Like they should have like highlighted some of the lines and just made some of it stand out a bit more, because it's just white and there's no blacks or anything in it. You can't see all the detail in it, which it just would have helped if they kind of painted bits of it to accentuate it a bit more. But he's great. He's a really interesting guy. Like he was originally a mime. And he had this character, Mr. Zero or something, and really popular in Hollywood, I think. And he would wear like silver makeup and he'd do this mime act and stuff. And I think that helped him get this role, because he was just really good at miming and like sort of.
And do you mean like on the street, like
yeah?
Oh right, okay.
And if I'm not mistaken, there is a shot in Iron Man 3 where he's actually back on the street in this character. and they asked him back for this movie for some reason, and you can see him. I'd need to again. Superboy Beyond did this wonderful interview with him, and he brought that up. So check that out. Douglas Myers or Barry Myers, a really interesting guy, and I think he's great. So where were we? Bizarro Darla sees Bizarro and immediately starts screaming. Did this remind you of anything?
My wedding night.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's the quote of the evening, and indeed the quote of the podcast. What I was going to say on a very similar thing, Brides. I think this exact thing happens in Bride of Frankenstein.
Oh, I've never seen Bride of Frankenstein.
Oh man, get on
yeah,
that. You're Mr. Horror man.
I am. I'm huge into my 80s horror. But I only started going back to like Universal and stuff before that. Over the last Halloween, I watched about 3 or 4 of the Christopher Lee Dracula movies and stuff. The Peter Cushing Dracula movies and that. But no, I've never seen Bride of Frankenstein, unfortunately.
I'm going to correct you there because we'll get some angry emails. That's actually Hammer you're talking about, not Universal.
Oh, Hammer, sorry.
But get on the Universal movies too. You love them. But yeah, she starts screaming at Bizarro, and Lex discovers that, but Bizarro is obviously heartbroken about this, that this was supposed to be his maid, and she hates him, and she clearly loves Lex and not him. And Lex notices that there's smoke billowing out of Bizarro Darla.
So he throws her at him.
Something seriously wrong. He throws her at Bizarro, and she explodes. But Bizarro survives, and he's very, very angry, and he starts choking Lex. And then the episode ends with Superboy slowly crawling away from the kryptonite, which is great, and great music from Kevin Kiner here, just sort of ramping up the tension. And then it ends with him kind of like climbing over the crevice of a building to get away from the kryptonite, but it's implied that his powers are all gone and he's just about to fall to his doom. Yeah,
really good. Really good.
And we get this lovely, the final shot is Gerard Christopher again, just approaching the camera in this like kind of crash zoom. Oh! It's pure cheese, and I love it. And the rear projection isn't great, but because it's set at night, it's a little, they can hide it a bit better.
And we obviously won't get into the next episode, but it does lead to a great opening of the next episode. I thought, which I was really impressed with as well. So yeah, no, really, really, I thoroughly enjoyed this. I really had a great time watching it. I appreciated everything that they did with it. I thought Barry Myers was great. I thought Sherman Howard was great. I thought Jared Christopher did a good job. I really was impressed by the visuals. The layered kind of sympathetic look at Bizarro, which I have never seen in any other live media before. Really enjoyed that. Do you think this Bizarro has influenced, like we talk about, Superboy did it first. Do you think this particular version of Bizarro in Superboy in any way affected, say, what Smallville did or Lois and Clark did in any way at all? Or do you think they didn't, or are they even aware of it?
Absolutely not. No way, no how.
Yeah.
I love my little underground conspiracy theory that the Smallville producers watched Superboy and stole a lot of ideas, but I think when you get right down to it, it's probably just a big coincidence, a really funny coincidence. But if it influenced anything, it possibly influenced the animated series, because there is a little bit more connective tissue there. Stan Berkowitz,
very true, actually. Yeah, excellent point.
Stan Berkowitz wrote a lot of episodes of these later seasons of Superboy, and then he ended up working on the animated series. And that were an episode we're going to talk.
Did I see on the credits that he was a producer on this episode?
I believe he was, yes.
And then it was written by Mike Carlin and Andy Helfer, which are obviously, and that's something that I think I said it when we spoke on Superfan about Superboy previously. Kudos to the producers and the people behind Superboy, bringing in the comic book writers and getting their input on episodes of this show and getting them. Like, we had J.M. DeMatteis on Superfan in our first year, and he wrote some excellent episodes of this show. I know one of them is one of your favorites. And it's like that's not even done now, really.
It is now.
Is it?
It's done more. Well, like Jeff Johns wrote a ton of episodes of Smallville, and he wrote a lot of The Flash.
Yeah, that's true. That's
like it is done a bit more now, but like by and large, it's still rare. I do personally think they're different disciplines, and you can't always cross over, but when they do, it is nice to see, and I think they do great work here, and we'll see that now as we get into season 1. Like, Mike Carlin wrote some bangers in season 1, even, I think. So we have our tally board. Super transformation, we have 1. Iconic wirework. I mean, it's like when you get into season 3, there's so much of it that it's like I kind of lose count. I'm gonna say iconic wirework at this stage. Look, there was definitely a couple of nice Bizarro ones. I'm gonna put it down as a 1.
Okay.
We don't have any first appearances in this episode. Do we have any Superboy did it first? No. Okay. Just to do a wraparound chat on the 2 episodes, Alan.
Yeah.
Just purely based on these 2 episodes with no other context, who is your favorite of the Superboys this week?
Oh, that's a tough question. That is a tough. So solely based on these 2 episodes.
Solely based on these 2 episodes, and we are acknowledging that Gerard Christopher has a bit of an unfair advantage.
Yeah, I think I have to go with Gerard Christopher, to be honest. I think it was just more polished.
I agree. I think he is better. If you compare the 2 performances, he's better in this episode than John Newton is in his one.
That scene of John Newton and Scott Wells meeting for the first time in that episode just really that lets it down a good bit for me. I still think Newton, does a serviceable good job throughout season 1. And like you said, it's an unfair advantage. Gerard Christopher had a full year of playing the character before we get into this episode. But yeah, I have to say, based on solely on these 2 episodes, I think Gerard is more polished.
Awesome stuff. And the last question I'm going to ask you, do you believe a 31-year-old boy can fly?
Yes, of course. Look at this room. Yes, I do. I think they did a great job.
Super duper. Alan, I hope you continue to return and fly with me through Shuster University and Capital City. What a great episode. Can't wait to do more of this crazy kooky show that I've come to love so much over the years. So that'll just about do it for this week's episode of Superboy, the podcast for the 90s. We will catch you all next time. Good luck.